minutes long. But I actually want to show you the evolution of this piece of music because it kind of goes back to what we've just been talking about. Okay? Now, back in 2008, I was asked to do music for a stage play by a bunch of AUC theatre alumni. I'm not going to go into details, but the play was called Infinity, and yes, I will leave it at that. And anyways, I presented them a piece which was for the opening of the play, and this version in particular that I played to them was actually rejected. They did not like the guitar element that I'd added to the track, so let me just play you that track. Okay, so it's a very electronic sounding piece. I was sitting there in a production meeting, and then I had two people give me this kind of very sullen look, and like, no, we don't like that. And I was quite agitated by that, but I just sucked it up and left it as it was. So I had the great idea of actually redoing this piece for my album. But then, shock horror, God forbid, I could not find the original recordings of this piece. And I realized that either out of frustration or anger, I must have deleted it. So I said, okay, well, I guess I could just redo it. And then usually when you go to redo a piece of music, something very funny happens. It usually ends up being completely different. And it's usually for the best. Okay, so let me just play you now the next kind of evolution of what I did with this. Basically that same section without the guitar. And as you can hear, it's very kind of played and very hectic. So I took it upon myself to start thinking of the things that I could do with this instrumentation. So then I said to myself, well, I really like doing very cinematic kind of sounding things. So what would happen if I added some timpanis and some of these big kind of Japanese sounding taiko drums? See how that sounds. So now we've got some percussion. Now let's add some melodic movement to it. So now I added some strings and a French horn section as well. should elaborate. I didn't actually get a timpanist or a violinist or any of these things. This was all done, once again, on the computer. Okay, and I'm basically using very expensive software to make it sound like real violins and real timpanis and whatnot. And it's actually very common for people in my line of work to do this. Because when I do work for productions, I'm not a classically trained composer, so when they say, okay, we want you to do something for the orchestra, most directors want to hear how it sounds. So if I hand the director a piece of sheet music, he's going to look at it and laugh and say, yeah, I see a bunch of black dots given to me by a person in a ponytail. So I have no faith in you whatsoever. How does this sound? So we use this software to actually create orchestral mock-ups. Okay? And fortunately, the software has got to a point where it can sound very realistic. But I would like to emphasize that at no point will this stuff ever be a substitute for the real thing. Okay, it is just a tool like many things that we use to make our lives simpler. But like I said, you cannot get a piece of software to sound like 20 or 30 people. It's just not physically possible. In the same way that you cannot get a piece of software to really sound like a real Duke. It can get very close, don't get me wrong, and if it's covered up in the right way like I did there, you can get away with it, but ultimately it will never actually put any of these people out of work. Okay? Once again, I'm babbling. Let me play you the piece now as it is. So this is 2035. lip fatigue has set in, so I'm very lucky I have to play that anymore. Questions? No questions? Yes, you young lady.
This is more of a comment than a question.
Aha.
What I find particularly intriguing is not just the sort of multi-ethnicity or multi-dimensional sounds, but the combination of it being extraordinarily cerebral and also performative, which is frankly unlike anything I've ever heard before.
See, the danger of being a musician is originality, as it were. You see, you can play things which basically everyone likes, but then you're basically doing what has been done 1,000 times over and over. And it's finding your own sound is really a very challenging thing for most musicians. It's actually the reason why a lot of musicians end up drunk and, maniacs. It's very, there's this infamous story of Peter Green from I think he was originally Fleetwood Mac actually for a while. And unfortunately, Peter Green ended up developing psychological problems and having electroshock therapy simply because he was struggling to find his own sound. And it's very sad and tragic, but it's a very common thing. I find myself in a very unusual position that for years and years, I always really hated my own sound. I hated how I sounded on guitar, I hated my own compositions, and then lo and behold, I said, well, to hell with it, let me just do it and see what people's reaction. And if they kill me, then at least I'll be put out of my misery. But ironically, people seem to like what I do for some bizarre reason. So thank you. Yes, Dr. John.
Dave,
Yes?
when you compose music, do you ever actually sit down like with a pencil and staff paper and stuff like that? Or do you directly work into the computer, or do you do a combination of it?
That's actually a very good question. It depends on said music. For example, I sometimes get a call from someone who says, look, I need some music for a TV series. I'm like, great, when do you need it? They're like, in about 5 hours. So in a situation like that, it's basically fire up the computer, write out a bunch of dribble that 2 hours later I'm not even going to remember, and then that's that. When it comes to doing things like this, where it's all very kind of multi-layered and there's a lot going on, I find it that if I'm not going to write it down, first of all, I'm going to forget what I've done, which is going to make it almost impossible for me to add anything else. For example, there's strings and there's timpani in there, but if I'm not aware of what the initial harmony was to begin with, then there is no way I can actually write the string pieces. So I usually will force myself to sit down with a pen and a pencil, or I should say a pencil and a paper, to actually write the music down, because the thing is with multi-layered music, this applies obviously to people who actually compose orchestral music like Dr. John. You cannot really understand what's going on musically till you actually look at the piece of paper and look at all the kind of tiny structures and how all these little structures together make one big sound. And problems with the computer, it's very easy to just kind of put the notes in and then 2 minutes later forget it and then not really see the whole picture. And that's why, like I said, I refer to myself as a producer more than a composer, because although I do sit with a pencil and paper, I probably don't do it enough. Any other questions? Yes, you young lady.
While you were playing the Duke, why weren't you facing the microphone? Why were you standing beside it?
Why was I not facing the microphone? That's a very good question. There's a problem with microphones, and it's called proximity effect. When I get close to the mic, you start getting what we call plosives. So when I say p or pa, you start getting these kind of horrible pop sounds. If I got the microphone and did that with the Duke, as a wind instrument, you're going to have a bunch of wind blowing into the microphone. And this microphone in particular is what we call a ribbon microphone. It does not like it when you do that to it, and it's actually a great way to destroy the microphone. So unless there's a windshield, which I don't have, I have to kind of make sure that I'm kind of across it, not facing it directly. Any other questions? Yes, you young man.
How much different is the process of notating on a computer? How is it different from notating on paper? Because I think you just have it do it for you.
You can have it do it for you, but there's a huge problem. Computers are retarded. The problem is with the computer, it cannot really, I've seen it before where someone has done like a score on MIDI, and then they printed it out using the built-in kind of scoring, element of the software, and it's just the most ridiculous thing. It will put like 13 eighth note rests when there was actually no need for that to be there. So it's just a case of the computer will make a score which to most real musicians is unreadable. You know, instead of putting all this rest, it could have just said expressively or slower, or and a real musician would read that and understand what to do. And it really does boil down to the software as well. I mean, does GarageBand even have that facility? I mean, I've never used it, so I don't know. Does it? Oh, okay. That's the thing. You know, I always say computers are good to help you complement what you're doing, but if you expect the computer actually to replace your actual musicianship skills, then you're actually in for a huge shock. You know, it is just a tool. You know, as a carpenter has his his chisel and whatnot, it's the same thing. Carpenters use chisels, don't they? Any other questions? No? Okay, well, I can see I'm babbling on and time is running out, so let me jump onto the next piece of music, which, lo and behold, my brain has started functioning again. I believe it's In the Shadow of Leaves. Good, good. 2 o'clock, and I think there's still one more thing left on the program, which I will play, and you guys can, for those of you that have to leave, be my guest, but if you want to stick around just one more minute, I'll play this last thing, and you can go. Okay, so this is basically the outro of a piece of music called Dream Worlds. Like I said, it's this whole thing of finding your sound, and for me, my sound seems to be a mix of this electric guitar and a whole bunch of kind of orchestral and ethnic sounding instruments. So here's Dream Worlds.